Chapter 13, Ronde. Ronde had 22 beautiful teeth. Everyone else had 24. Ronde was missing her two front teeth, and those were the most beautiful teeth of all. "Your front teeth are so cute," said Mrs. Jules. "They make you look just adorable." "But Mrs. Jules," said Ronde, "I don't have any front teeth." "I know," said Mrs. Jules. "That's what makes them so cute." Ronde didn't understand. "Ooh, Ronde, I just love your two front teeth," said Marcia. "I wish I had some like that." "But I don't have them," said Ronde. "That's why I love them so much," said Marcia. "Oh, this is silly," said Ronde. "Everybody thinks the teeth I don't have are cute. I'm not wearing a coat. Don't you all love my coat? And what about my third arm? I don't have one. Isn't it lovely?" "Love your hat, Ronde," said Joy. "I'm not wearing a hat," Ronde screamed. "That's what makes it so interesting," said Joy. "Don't you think so, Leslie?" "Oh, yes," said Leslie. "It's a very nice hat. Nice boots, too." "I'm not wearing boots," Ronde insisted. "Yes," said Joy, "very nice boots. They go so well with your hat." "What hat?" asked Ronde. "Yes," Leslie agreed. "Ronde shows excellent taste by not wearing the hat or the boots. They go so well together." Ronde had enough. She covered her head so nobody could see her hat. She put her feet under her desk so nobody could see her boots. Then she closed her mouth tightly so that nobody could see her two front teeth. Suddenly, everybody who was sitting near her began to laugh. "What's so funny?" asked Todd. "The joke Ronde didn't tell," said Jason. "Ask Ronde not to tell it again, Todd," said Calvin. "Ronde," said Todd, "don't tell it again." Ronde was horrified. She didn't know what to do. She kept her mouth shut and just stared at Todd. To her amazement, Todd laughed. "Hey, everybody," called Todd. "Listen to Ronde's joke." Ronde didn't say a word, but the rest of the class began to laugh. Mrs. Jules got very angry. She wrote Ronde's name on the blackboard under the word discipline. "The classroom is not the place for jokes," she said. "But Mrs. Jules," said Ronde, "I didn't tell a joke." "Yes, I know," said Mrs. Jules, "but the funniest jokes are the ones that remain untold." Okay, said Ronde. "If that's what you want, then that's what you'll get. I'll really tell a joke. That way I won't disturb the class. And tomorrow I'll wear boots and a hat. Of course, you won't like them as much as the ones I didn't wear today. But I better hurry up and tell my joke before you all start to laugh. There was a monkey sitting in a banana tree. He was very hungry. He knew that somewhere in the tree there was a magic banana, and that once he ate that banana, he wouldn't be hungry anymore. He ate one banana, and that wasn't it. He was still hungry. He ate another banana. That wasn't it either. He was still hungry. Finally, after he ate his 10th banana, he wasn't hungry anymore. "I knew I'd find it," he said. "It's too bad I didn't eat that one first. I would have had to waste all those other bananas." Nobody laughed. Nobody even listened to Ronde. But Mrs. Jules was busy teaching arithmetic, and everybody else was paying strict attention. Ronde slapped herself in the face to make sure she was really there. She was. The bell rang for recess. Ronde ran outside. She was very upset. Louis, the yard teacher, saw her. "Why the frown, Ronde?" he asked. "Come on, smile. Let me see your cute front teeth." Ronde screamed. She socked Louis in the stomach, then bit his arm with her missing teeth, and that kind of bite hurts the worst. Chapter 14, Sammy. It was a horrible, stinky, rainy day. Some rainy days are fun and exciting, but not this one. This one stunk. All the children were wet and wore smelly raincoats. The whole room smelled awful. "Ooh, it stinks in here," said Marcia. Everybody laughed, but she was right. There was one good thing, however. There was a new boy in class. New kids are always fun, except no one could even tell what he looked like. He was completely covered by his raincoat. "Class," said Mrs. Jules, "I'd like you all to meet Sammy. Let us show him what a nice class we can be." Leslie walked up and smiled at Sammy, but her smile quickly turned into a frown. "You smell terrible," she said. "Leslie!" exclaimed Mrs. Jules. "That's no way to greet a new member of our class." Mrs. Jules wrote Leslie's name on the blackboard under the word discipline. "But he does, Mrs. Jules," said Leslie. "He smells awful." "You're ugly," Sammy replied. "Now, Sammy, that's no way to talk," said Mrs. Jules. "Leslie's a very pretty girl." "She's ugly," said Sammy. Allison spoke up. "Well, you smell terrible and are probably even uglier, but nobody can see you because you're hiding under that smelly old raincoat." "That will be enough of that," said Mrs. Jules. "Now, Sammy, why don't you take off your coat and hang it in the closet? Let us all see how nice you look." "I don't want to, you old windbag," said Sammy. "That's because he's so ugly," said Leslie. "I'm sure he's quite handsome," said Mrs. Jules. "He's just shy. Here, let me help you." Mrs. Jules took off Sammy's coat for him, but underneath it was still another raincoat, and smellier and dirtier than the first one. They still couldn't see his face. "Ooh, now he smells even worse," said Marcia. "You don't exactly smell like a rose either," Sammy replied. Mrs. Jules took off his second raincoat, but there was still another one under that. And the smell became so bad that Mrs. Jules had to run and stick her head out of the window to get some fresh air. "You're all a bunch of pigs," Sammy screeched. "Dirty, rotten pigs." The smell was overpowering. Sammy just stood there, hidden under his raincoats. Mrs. Jules wrote Sammy's name under the word discipline. "Sending him home on the kindergarten bus," said Joy. "Not with me," said Todd. Mrs. Jules held her nose, walked up to Sammy, and removed his raincoat. She threw it out the window, but he still had another one on. Sammy hissed, "Hey, you old windbag! Watch where you throw my good clothes." Mrs. Jules put a check next to Sammy's name on the blackboard. Then she took off another raincoat and threw it out the window. The smell got worse, for he still had another one on. Sammy began to laugh. His horrible laugh was even worse than his horrible voice. When Sammy first came into the room, he was 4 feet tall, but after Mrs. Jules removed 6 of his raincoats, he was only 3 feet tall, and there were still more raincoats to go. Mrs. Jules circled his name and removed another coat. She threw it out the window, and then she put a triangle around the circle and threw another one of his coats outside. She kept doing this until Sammy was only 1.5 feet high. With every coat she took off, Sammy's laughter got louder and louder, and the smell got worse. Some of the children held their ears. Others could hold only one ear because they were holding their nose with the other hand. It was hard to say which was worse, the laugh or the smell. Sammy stopped laughing and said, "Hey, you old windbag, if you take one more of my coats, I'll throw it out the window. I'll bite your head off." "They smell too bad for me to allow them in my classroom," said Mrs. Jules. "You can pick them up when you leave." "They smell better than you do, pighead," Sammy shouted. Mrs. Jules didn't stop. She took another one of his coats off, then another and another. Sammy was only 4 inches tall, 3 inches tall, 2 inches tall. At last she removed the final coat. All that there was a dead rat. "Well, I don't allow dead rats in my classroom," said Mrs. Jules. She picked it up by the tail, put it in a plastic bag, and threw it away. Mrs. Jules didn't allow dead rats in her class. Todd once brought in a dead rat for show and tell, and Mrs. Jules made him throw that one away, too. "I'm glad Sammy isn't allowed in our classroom," said Ronde. "I didn't like him very much." "Yes," said Mrs. Jules, "we caught another one." Dead rats were always trying to sneak into Mrs. Jules' class. That was the 3rd one she caught since September. Chapter 15, Dede. This story contains a problem and a solution. Dede was a mousy-looking kid. Unlike most children at Wayside School, she liked recess better than spelling. As soon as the recess bell rang, she would jump up from her seat and run out the door. There were big signs in Wayside School on every floor. No jumping down the stairs. Dede never seemed to notice the signs. She jumped down the stairs. Some children took the stairs 2 at a time. Dede took them 10 at a time. That was on the way down. It was funny. She never seemed to be in quite the same hurry on the way back up. There was another sign at Wayside School. No cutting across the grass. Dede must not have seen that one either. She cut across the grass and ran up to Louis, the yard teacher. I want a green ball, Dede said. The green balls were the best. I'm all out of green balls, said Louis. Okay, then I want a red ball, said Dede. The red balls were just about as good as the green balls. They didn't bounce as high, but actually sometimes you don't want a ball to bounce too high. I'm all out of red balls too, said Louis. Do you have anything left? asked Dede. Dede meant anything besides the yellow ball. There was one yellow ball at Wayside School, and Louis was always trying to get rid of it. It didn't bounce, and it never went the way it was kicked. Anything at all? asked Dede. Today is your lucky day, said Louis. I have one ball left, just for you. The one and the only yellow ball. No thanks, said Dede. Aw, come on, take it, said Louis. Why don't you ever have any green or red balls? asked Dede. I do, said Louis, but the other children ask first. By the time you get out here, they're all gone. But that's because I have to come all the way down from the 30th story. How do you expect me to compete with the kids from the first or second? She asked. That's why I saved you the yellow ball, said Louis. Everybody wanted it, but I saved it just for you. I bet, said Dede. She took the yellow ball and bounced it on the ground. It stopped dead with a thud. She stepped back, ran up, and kicked it. It went backwards over her head. She didn't bother chasing it. Instead, she played hopscotch with Jenny and Leslie. She thought it was disgusting. The next day, Dede asked Mrs. Jules if she could go to recess early. Why? asked Mrs. Jules. So I can get a green ball before Louis gives them all away, said Dede. I'm glad you have a good reason, said Mrs. Jules. Yes, you may go, but first spell Mississippi for me. Spelling was not Dede's best subject. By the time she finally got it right, she was 5 minutes late for recess. She jumped down the stairs, cut across the grass, and ran up to Louis. There were no green balls left. There were no red balls left either. However, there was still the yellow ball. Dede played jump rope with Joy and Marcia. It was no better than hopscotch. So Dede's problem was to figure out a way to get a green ball or at least a red ball. You already know that this story also contains a solution. Dede figured it out. See if you can too. Remember everything you know about Dede, Wayside School, and Mrs. Jules. Hint, the next day, Dede brought a cream cheese and jelly sandwich, some nuts, and shredded cheese in her lunchbox. Here's what happened. Just before recess, Dede smeared the cream cheese and jelly all over her face. Then she stuffed her mouth with nuts and hung the shredded cheese from her nose. When she closed her eyes, she looked just like a dead rat. Todd was in on the plan. Mrs. Jules, he called, there's a dead rat in the classroom. Mrs. Jules was very put out. I want that dead rat outside immediately. When Mrs. Jules said immediately, she meant it. Dede instantly found herself outside on the playground. I want a green ball, she said. Louis pretended that he hadn't heard her. May I please have a green ball? asked Dede. Louis gave her a green ball. I don't know how you did it, Dede, but you're first today, he said. When Mrs. Jules found out that Dede and Todd had tricked her, she sent Todd home early on the kindergarten bus. Dede threw the green ball on the ground. It bounced 50 feet straight up in the air, and then she caught it. You don't like me, do you? She asked Louis. Sure I do, said Louis. No, you don't, said Dede. Yes, I like you, said Louis. No, you don't, Dede insisted. Yes, I like you. I really do, said Louis. Are you sure? asked Dede. Yes, said Louis. Do you believe me? I guess so, said Dede. Do you like me? asked Louis. You bet, said Dede. You're my best friend. Terrific, said Louis. I always wanted to be best friends with a dead rat.